Hi, I'm Gil Hova, and this is my game, Battle Merchants. Battle Merchants is an economic strategy game for 2 to 4 players. It takes about 90 minutes to play. The object of the game is to make the most money by selling various weapons to the 4 warring races of this strange little world. Orcs, elves, dwarves, and hobgoblins. So before we go any further, I wanted to make sure you knew that all of the components you're seeing on this table are prototype components, and it's not actually what the game is going to look like. The actual game is going to look more like this. So, as I keep on showing you the rules to this game, we're going to cut to a lot of the newer components so you'll have an idea of what the game is actually going to look like. But everything on this table is really more for an idea of how the game plays and not what the game actually looks like. So with that in mind, let's dive in. So first, we're going to look at the board. So this is what the board looks like over here. Again, prototype version of the board, so the final art is very different. What's important are these lines of weapon spaces all around the board, because these indicate demand. For example, our buddies the hobgoblins over here. The hobgoblins in the dungeon want a longsword, and the hobgoblins in the mountains want a polearm, and that sort of thing. So these spots are tied to the hobgoblin. These spots over here are tied to the dwarves, and so on. So that's the first important thing about the board. Next, if you look in the middle of the board, we've got a season tracker. Because the game goes over the course of 1 game year. We're going to start in the spring, and what's going to happen is we're all going to take a bunch of turns, and at some point spring is going to end, and there's going to be battles. When the battles are over, we go to summer, we take a bunch of turns, summer ends, we're going to have a bunch of battles. Then we'll go to autumn, and so on and so forth, until the end of winter, at which case we will tally up the most money, and the player with the most money wins. So now let's go to the weapons. So we've got 4 kinds of weapons. We have battle axes, we have the long swords, we have the maces, and we have the polearms. In the final version of the game, polearms are going to become hammers because hammers are cool. Of these 4 weapons, there are 2 types of weapons. We have standard weapons and we have Vorpal weapons. The standard weapons are what you're going to start the game being able to make, but at some point in the game you might be able to start forging the more powerful Vorpal weapons, and just as importantly, these Vorpal weapons also give you a little more revenue. On your turn, you get to take 1 action, and you have 4 choices of what that action is going to be. You can upgrade craft, you can take a kingdom card, you can forge weapons, or you can sell a weapon. There is a 5th action you can take, but you will have to earn this action in the middle of the game. It's not available at the beginning of the game. That's the ability to forge and sell a weapon in the same action, and you can only get this by getting a certain number of craft in a certain weapon. So let's talk about craft. Every player starts with the ability to forge 2 standard weapons. Red over here can forge a standard polearm or a standard battle axe. You only have 1 level, so these weapons are going to be pretty weak in battle. You can improve all that with craft. So on the start of your turn, there's always going to be 5 craft cards available to you. So here are the 5 cards that we have to choose from. Some of the cards say that they're free, so we can just take this card here, add it to our collection of craft, and now in a future turn when we forge, in addition to being able to forge a polearm or a battle axe, we can also forge a standard mace. Now, we could also forge a weapon that we already have craft in. So this weapon, you'll notice, has an X1 on it. That means that it costs money to draw this craft card. This card costs 1 gold coin for every level of craft you already have in that weapon. So since red already has 1 level in polearm, this card is going to cost 1 gold coin. The benefit of this card, the reason it costs money, is because it gives you a discount. When you forge a polearm for the rest of the game, each polearm is going to cost 1 gold coin less. Additionally, red now has 2 levels in polearm instead of 1. That means when red goes into battle with his polearms are going to be that much more powerful. Now some of these cards have 2 icons on them. So as you may have guessed, these cards bump up your craft level for the particular weapon by 2 instead of 1. So red now has 3 levels of craft in polearm. But these cards cost twice as much. So this card over here is going to cost 2 gold coin because we have 1 level of polearm when we took it times 2. If red had this card already and drafted this card, it would cost 4 gold coins. Let's go to forging weapons now. Green has craft in polearm, longsword, and mace, so green has the ability to forge a standard weapon of any of these. When you forge, you can forge up to 3 weapons, and it is your choice what mix of weapons you can forge. They're all going to cost 5 gold coins, although if you have any discounts, you might pay less per weapon. So in this case, let's say since we start the game with only 10 gold coins, that green is going to forge a standard polearm and a standard longsword. Okay? We could have forged 2 longswords or 2 polearms or 2 maces, but for this argument, we are just going to forge a standard polearm and a standard longsword. Once we've forged these guys, we just take a couple of cubes just to indicate that they're available to sell now. It's important that other players see this. Let's look at selling weapons. If you look over at the board, this first thing that we need to see on the board is that we can't actually sell to every space out on the board. The general rule is that if you have a face-up or a missing demand chip for a space, you can sell to either square on that space. So right now here, the hobgoblins in the dungeon want a longsword, and the orcs in the dungeon want a mace. But that's it. Any face-down chip means that these squares are locked. So we can't actually sell here yet. It's the same thing for the rest of the board. We can only sell to these 2 spaces because this is face up, the rest of these are face down, which locks the rest of the spaces. With that in mind, let's go ahead and sell this longsword to the hobgoblins. So here we are, 1 longsword sold to the hobgoblins, and that's going to get us some money. We've got a base sell of $6, but the green player has a bonus printed on his player mat for the hobgoblins. That means he's going to get 1 extra gold coin every time he sells to the hobgoblins. So now, instead of just getting 6, green is going to get 7. And there's 7 gold coins. The next thing the player does after a sale is look over in this reward tile section to see if there's a reward tile in his colored space. And look at that, there is a hobgoblin reward tile over here. So now we're going to take this tile and we're going to put it on the player mat. So now in the future, the next time we sell to the hobgoblins as green, we're going to get 2 extra gold coins instead of 1. We're going to make 8 gold coins. This space is now empty. So for the rest of the season, when we sell to the hobgoblins, they're not going to give us any extra reward tiles. We have to go to other races to get more reward tiles. At the end of the season, this is going to all restock, and then the hobgoblins can give us some more rewards for selling to them. One important part of this game is what's going to happen on a future turn. Let's say that at some point later, the red player sells this standard mace across from where we just sold our longsword. This is an interesting situation over here because now we've got this demand chip that's surrounded by two weapons. What happens here is that this chip moves to the middle of the board and the next chip gets flipped. And that is actually going to unlock these two spaces. So now the hobgoblins here want a polearm and the orcs here want a battle axe. So that's how demand changes. As the game keeps moving, we're going to see more and more chips move to the middle of the board. Once the third chip goes to the middle of the board, that triggers the end of the season. So every other player will get one final turn, and then we're going to have battles, and then the player who triggered the end of the season will begin the next season, which is usually an advantage to that player. The Kingdom cards are cards that give you special powers during the game, and there's always going to be 3 available at the start of your turn. I'm going to show you 3 sample Kingdom cards to give you an idea of what they do. So this card over here is called Blackmail, and it gets you 5 gold coins, and that's it. You see at the bottom it says immediate. That means it's a one-time use. You never actually take it. You just set it to the side, and that's it. Over here, let's look at the next card. This card's called Localized Need, and you see at the bottom it says permanent. That means when you take it, you're going to take it and keep it in front of you for the rest of the game. Every season has a number of Kingdom cards, a maximum. So at the beginning of the game, you can hold 2 Kingdom cards at most. In the summer, that becomes 3 Kingdom cards at most. And then in the winter, that becomes 4 Kingdom cards at most. So you have to be judicious about which permanent Kingdom cards you take. So let's look back at Localized Need. So what does this card actually give us? Well, it gives us a pretty nice power. We can actually go to the board over here and take this Mountains Rewards tile, move it back to the player mat, and put it in our bonuses section. So now every time we sell to the Mountains space, regardless of which race, we're going to get an extra gold coin. That's pretty nice power to have for the rest of the game. So let's look at the final Kingdom card that's available here. This one's called Instigator. So what this card will let us do is, let's say that we have the situation on the board over here where the orcs have a mace. We can sell a longsword to the hobgoblins. As you saw in the example before, that would normally get green 7 gold coins. But wait, if we have Instigator and we move a chip to the middle of the board, according to the Instigator card, that will actually get us 1 additional gold coin. And that's pretty sweet. So I've fast-forwarded the game state a little bit. We're at the end of spring. We're between spring and summer. Battles are going to happen now. I've just mocked up the board for 3 quick battles, just so you can see how battles work. So battles happen at the end of every season. Every time the season ends, we're going to look at weapons that are paired facing each other, and those are the weapons that are actually going to fight each other. So let's start over here in the forest. The elves have this nice big Vorpal longsword, whereas the orcs have this dinky standard battle axe. The rule is the Vorpal always beats the standard, so Snicker Snack, longsword wins. If you look at the back of a tile, all of the standard tiles have a 1 on the back. That indicates that the player who takes the tile as a trophy, in this case the red player, now has 1 point for the defeated armies bonus at the end of the game. The defeated armies bonus, whoever has the most points of defeated armies will get 15 gold coins at the end of the game. Second most gets 7 gold coins. So it's a nice way to bump things up. So now that we're done with this battle, let us look over in the dungeon. So for the dungeon, we've got a pretty interesting battle over here in that we've got 2 standard weapons facing each other. We've got a standard longsword versus a standard mace. So since neither is Vorpal, which one wins? We're going to actually look at craft. Red has 5 levels of craft in longsword, whereas green has only 1 level of craft in mace. So 5 to 1, red will win this battle, and red will take the 1 point defeated armies bonus once again. Let's say, hypothetically speaking, that red has 1 level of craft in mace, and green has 1 level of craft in polearm. So now we've got a true tie. So what happens here is these armies are just going to keep on fighting, but for the purposes of the game, we're actually going to remove them out of the game. So a big difference than before is these weapon tiles are not going to go to the player's defeated armies. Instead, they're going to go back out of the game. They're going to go into supply. So neither player gets them for the defeated army's bonus. The players will each get 1 gold coin in compensation. So let's look at the board now. At the end of battles, everyone looks at their surviving weapons, and there are usually a few more surviving weapons than this. This was just a very simple example. And whoever has surviving weapons on the board gets 2 gold coins for every weapon, whether or not it was involved in a fight. In this very simple example, red would get 4 gold coins, 2 for each surviving weapon. I mentioned that there was a 5th action, so this action has to be earned. This action is the Forge and Sell action, and in order to get to this action, you need to get to 6 levels of craft. In this example, red has 5 levels of craft. If red were to get a 6th level of craft and be the first to 6 levels of craft in this particular weapon, red would get the special craft bonus, which is once per season, red may now forge and sell a longsword as a single action. So let's say red has 7 gold coins on him, and red decides to use this action later in the game. So instead of taking the 4 basic actions, red will instead choose to take the Forge and Sell action. So what that means is red will flip the tile over. He'll get to unflip it at the end of the season. You can only use the Forge and Sell action once per season. Red will pay the base forge cost, that's 5 gold coins, and red will get to forge a longsword. Could be Vorpal, could be standard, depends on how much money, what you can afford. In this case, red can afford a standard, so that's what we get. But this lets you forge and sell in the same action. So now red will get to sell a longsword out onto the board. And then this is to the hobgoblins, so red will get 7 gold coins, and all as part of the same action. Being able to do a forge and a sell on the same action is very sweet. And that's it. That's a quick summary of how to play Battle Merchants. I really hope you found this game. This is going to be a really cool game. You can look over at the side to see the various funding levels we've set up. Otherwise, I really hope you become a part of this, because this is going to be a great game. Thanks for watching.